How's it going, everybody? Thank you very much for watching. I'm Orlando Ruiz Jr., and welcome to another classic movie review. So, this is going to be my review for the 1946 classic black and white film, The Big Sleep, starring Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. And I understand these two actors were actually dating in real life, so that chemistry, that whatever was going on behind the scenes, it definitely transfers onto the screen because it is great to watch in this film. These two are awesome, and some really great moments in this film. This is like classic, iconic detective noir film, and one of my favorite films of all time. So, wanted to talk about this with y'all. And this is directed by Howard Hawks, who's made some classic movies like the original 1932 Scarface, starring Paul Muni, George Raft, and Boris Karloff. And he also directed the 30s screwball comedy classic Bring Up Baby, starring Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. I will talk about that movie and review it on this channel eventually, one of my favorite comedies of all time. And this is based on a book by Raymond Chandler, who has contributions to screenplays of some great movies like Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. And he also contributed to Double Indemnity's screenplay, the 1944 classic from Billy Wilder starring Fred MacMurray, another one of my favorite films. I also have a review of that movie on this channel if you want to check it out. And so, yeah, let's get started with this classic movie review. So, uh, this is a great story. This is a very dense plot, a lot of names to remember, a lot of faces, and you really have to pay attention when you watch this movie and try to pick up on all these names because a lot of names are brought up, characters are brought up, and they all come into play eventually. So this movie begins, and our main character, played by Bogart, Philip Marlowe, arrives at the home of a rich man, General Sternwood. And so the door opens. Norris, the butler, lets him in. They have a small little exchange of words. And right after he meets Norris, the butler, he meets Carmen Sternwood, who is General Sternwood's younger daughter. She's kind of bubbly and flirty and very immature. She's all falling all over the place, practically falls in his lap. He catches her. He's a little amused by it, but you can tell he's not really into it. And he goes in the next room, meets General Sternwood, who is an old man, kind of frail looking, in a wheelchair. And apparently, there was a man named Sean Regan who was working for General Sternwood, who just happens to be an old acquaintance of Marlowe, the Bogart character. And this Sean Regan has mysteriously gone missing. And like General Sternwood points out, he was more than an employee, he was kind of like a son to him. Before Marlowe can leave the house to begin his investigation, one more person wants to meet him, and that is General Sternwood's older daughter, Vivian Rutledge, played by Lauren Bacall. She is excellent in this part, by the way. And in their very first scene together, where she asks the butler to bring him in, and he comes in and meets her for the first time, they have this great chemistry that sizzles right through the screen, probably because they were dating in real life, and so all of that really just transferred beautifully in their scenes because their back and forth is just fun to watch. Their dialogue is very quick and quippy and snappy. He says all kinds of things that kind of get on her nerves, and she kind of is a little bit combative, a little bit of attitude. In this scene where they meet for the first time, Marlowe gives her a little bit of his own personality, and you can tell she's a little bit off put by it, but also a little bit turned on by it because, like she even tells him in this scene, she says, "Nobody talks to me like that." And she says, "Do you always kind of get what you want?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I usually talk like this to whoever, and I usually get away with it too." And he has like this real air of confidence about him. It's really cool. He's like one of the coolest characters ever, really, on the screen. In this scene, it looks like Mrs. Rutledge is very curious about Marlowe and what he's going to be investigating. And you can tell he's kind of curious to why she's so curious. And so she kind of, on the surface, just says that, "Yeah, I just want this whole thing kind of handled nice and neatly because my dad, he's not in the best of health. And so just kind of take care of this as quickly and quietly as possible." And you can tell that he can tell that there is some kind of false pretense under all of this, and he's not dumb at all. So it's a very good scene that has layers to it. As a matter of fact, a lot of the scenes in this movie do because this is based on a very dense book. So a lot going on. And so in the next scene, Marlowe decides to begin his investigation by going to the Hollywood Public Library to do a little bit of research on old books, books that are basically like out of print, so that he can go to the bookstore owned by Arthur G. Geiger and ask about them to see how much they know about their business, because he has a hunch that maybe this bookstore may be a front for something else. And it's a really cool scene because when he arrives at the bookstore, uh, kind of reminds me of Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop, the way he thinks on his toes, the way Axel Foley improvises depending on whatever the situation is. That's basically Philip Marlowe, Humphrey Bogart's character in this film. He's very quick on his feet. He improvises when he has to, and so he pulls up the brim of his hat a bit, puts on glasses, and changes up his voice and the way he talks, and goes inside this bookstore and asks for a couple of her old books. And so the lady there working at the counter, she kind of she kind of acts like she doesn't really know what he's talking about, and so that kind of sparks his interest a bit more. And he puts on this facade of this guy that's just like this book guy. So he doesn't let on that he's a detective at all. And after he realizes that something else is going on here, he decides he's going to go to the other bookstore right across the street to see if he can hang out there for a little bit and wait for the Geiger guy who this woman is protecting, because he knows that he's there and she's basically saying he's not here, but he knows he's there. So he goes across the street and meets this really nice girl at a rival bookstore, the Acme bookstore. It being a Warner Brothers movie, Acme is a nice little uh, promotion for their cartoons, I think. And so, or just a nice little Easter egg. And so he meets a really nice girl there who it doesn't seem like we even get her name at this entire scene where he meets her, but they do have this little something because they flirt with each other quite a bit. And you can tell when he's hanging out there at this bookstore, because he asks about these old books, and she's like, you're not going to find these books. And he's like, yeah, but they across the street, they didn't know that. And so, speaking of this other girl across the street, he realizes that this place is definitely a front. And she kind of obliges and lets him stay in there while it's raining. And she even lets down her hair, takes off her glasses, brings out a couple of cups, pours them a couple of drinks, and they're just like chilling and flirting a little bit. Very nice moment. And finally, Geiger comes out of the store across the street, out of his bookstore front, and of course, Humphrey Bogart's character spots him and tells the girl, "Hey, I gotta bounce. I'm sorry." And when he leaves, um, you could tell she is very disappointed. She wanted him to stick around. She definitely had a crush on Marlowe, and so he follows Geiger to a house, and Geiger goes into a house, and all of a sudden he hears gunshots, and so Marlowe races inside to see what's going on, and Marlowe sees Geiger on the ground, and who else is there? None other but Carmen Sternwood sitting in a chair, uh, almost over the body, kind of, and she is kind of giggling and laughing in the corner. And right away, questions arise, and Marlowe wants to know what's going on, and of course she's not saying anything because she's like high as a kite and giggling and stuff. And so uh, Marlowe takes her out of there, brings her back home, and goes back to the scene of the crime, and somebody has taken the body. The body is gone. And like I said before, there are a lot of names to memorize in this movie because if you don't know the names, you're going to get lost and mixed up. And honestly, it took me about 2 viewings to watch this movie so I could get in sync with all these names, because the movie throws a lot of names at you. So this is one of those movies that might take a couple of viewings to really get it because there's so many characters. But you're gonna run into all kinds of oddball characters, and uh, these guys that are trying to keep him off the trail, guys that are trying to stop Marlowe, and even the obligatory cop that's there to help out the detective. Uh, this guy that is kind of friends with Marlowe, and he's the guy that hooked Marlowe up with a job working for General Sternwood. And so he's kind of Marlowe's confidant in the movie. And then you have um, people that are like uh, false bad guys, and then you have people that are actual bad guys, and just a lot of characters. You got people like Eddie Mars, you got Mona Mars, you got Joe Brody. You got Lash can't remember the name. Canino. And you got Lundgren. What was it? Carol Lundgren. And so a lot of names in this movie that you got to try and remember because they all come into play in some way. And the the guy Eddie Mars has a couple of goons, Sydney and Pete. And so all these things, kind of get in Philip Marlowe's way as he kind of tries to navigate through this basically a web of deceit. This web of lies before him. This is one of my favorite films, and this is a movie that has inspired countless other movies, not just in this genre, but in other subgenres. And as you can no doubt tell by that poster behind me on the wall, I am a fan of the Coen brothers and The Big Lebowski. It's one of my favorite movies, and there are some similarities between The Big Lebowski and The Big Sleep, as you can no doubt already see by that title. There is a similarity right there, and even things in the plot are heavily inspired by The Big Sleep. You have the old man in the wheelchair, who is the one that has this case for our main character. You have the butler. You have somebody who is like a younger woman who owes money all over town. In this film, it's the Carmen Sternwood character. In The Big Lebowski, it is uh, a wife in the form of Tara Reid's character, who is very much like the Carmen Sternwood character. You also have all kinds of different characters that come out of nowhere, characters that are seedy and goons, a couple of goons. In The Big Sleep, there isn't a scene where they take Humphrey Bogart's character and dunk him in the toilet or anything like that, but they do have Sydney and Pete in this movie, and they are kind of like a couple of uh, dumb goons, basically. And like in The Big Lebowski, Lebowski gets roughed up a little bit, and it kind of happens a little bit with The Big Sleep with the Marlowe character, and there's all kinds of little similarities and uh, little Easter eggs that are thrown in there for fans of The Big Sleep. So those of you that are fans of The Big Lebowski, I think if you see The Big Sleep, you will see what I'm talking about, and it's pretty cool to see that the Coen brothers were influenced by something that uh, helped shape one of their best comedies. This is a movie that I can highly recommend. This is a movie that I have found on HBO Max before in their Turner Classic Movies section. And so this is not a movie that has been forgotten or is lost. The Big Sleep can be found on streaming, but like I'm always saying, the hard copies are out there. This is my copy of the Blu-ray. That is Bogart and Becall there in the front. And so yeah, 1946 is The Big Sleep. Great black and white classic film. Highly recommend you all check it out. It is a 4-star gem. So thank you all very much for watching this classic movie review. If you're into these kind of reviews, if you're into classic movies, hit that bell and subscribe, and look out for more classic movie reviews. And comment, share, like, all that stuff, and please look out for the next classic movie review. Thank you very much, and take care, everybody.